Okay, so now I wanted to go ahead and give some information for the bottom of the hand. Again, for the same reason, this is something that we would take and then digest into our drawing process. So a few key landmarks. Again, I'm looking for the ulna, which is here, and I've kind of left the bones visible. Radius here. Again, keep in mind how the width of these is going to be our gesture in terms of how I introduce the wrist into the flow of the fingers, and how those usually go to the middle three. They don't have to always, but that's where I like to find it. And then I could build the small finger and then the thumb off of that. So do we have any of this information visible for the bottom? Yes, but not directly. So what I'm going to be looking at here would be instead the cartilage and the padding. It's not that this isn't influential or important. It's just that I really actually want to play up the textural differences. So we know that the top would be a hard surface, and that's because of bone being closer to the skin, and that the bottom of the hand, which is shown here, is soft. And that's an asymmetry that is really valuable when drawing the hand to break up that regularity. So first let's talk about muscle, and then we'll get to padding. So in the hand there's three teardrop muscles, and this is how I look at it, and this is again a very unanatomical perspective in terms of the rigors of it. It's all design. So it's design and simplifying. So three teardrop shapes, and these would be your muscles that you could remember. And so I'm just looking for the big areas that a shape would contribute in terms of the overall look or feel of the hand. So the first is, and let's start at the top, a muscle called the interdorsal, or first interdorsal, and that's going to be a muscle that sits right here and then pulls down the length or into the proximal phalanx of the finger. And so this is that area that, sometimes people will say, if you pinch around here, you'll get rid of a headache, or it relieves pressure if you're having a migraine or something like that. So I think there must be some kind of pressure point around here, even though I've squeezed it until I've been blue in the face and still had migraines. So that is one teardrop shape, and that fills in the gap. So you can see, if you look at your own hand, how that would be pinched if you pull your thumb in, and how if you pull your thumb away it's stretched. So it has an adduction quality. So that is one. Maybe we would see that on this side here. So I want to be considerate of what I would see top and bottom. Okay, so that's done. Now, even though this wouldn't be one of our three, the in-between areas of your metacarpal are also filled in by muscles. And so the muscles that sit in between here kind of look like leaves, or at least that's how I'm kind of comfortable thinking about them. Right, and then a little part for each will pull into the knuckle, and then they kind of have this structure almost like leaves. And so this will fill in each area. So here, 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 all the way in between the metacarpals. So the reason I would bring this up is because it shows that the top of the hand is ending around here, right? Or, consistent with the end of the knuckle, so maybe a little bit further down. And that's where you would see this muscle kind of terminate. So we'll come back to that. Next two, you have this area that we talked about earlier, kind of like that wristband of tendon or retinaculum that's pulling around the wrist, kind of holding down the tendons or keeping them in place. But we can also see muscles pulling from here. Two teardrops. One is the hypothenar eminence, and then thenar eminence, so kind of groups here. Now this one you can feel on the bottom of your hand, as if you were to karate chop somebody. Right? So it would be flexed or kind of pinching if you abduct your small finger away. So that's when we give it a C curve if the pinky finger started to pull out. So here's one shape, and then we're going to cover these with some of the padding, so it's going to be a little bit minimized. If I were to put it here, I would see it on the top a little bit. So here's the muscle sitting alongside that last metacarpal, and then down to the first digit. So one thing worth pointing out here is, just like with muscles, remember the asymmetry, that this is high, this is slightly lower, so it is giving your hand some gestural rhythm in the contour area or structure. So hypothenar and then thenar. And so again, I'm just applying a basic idea of that shape here, and then it doesn't matter to me exactly where I point it, I just try to get it in the area, right, or directed to the origin and insertion. I don't have that relationship to, in drawing at least, to anatomy where everything is exact and perfect. It's more generalized or designed for practical. So here we're going to have this, as a flexing muscle, but also something that can adduct, kind of bring the thumb towards the middle. And when that does, or it starts to pull this way, that's when we'd feel the pinching, right, of the muscle of the thumb pushing in against the skin, and we'd start to get some of these folds in the crease of the palm. So those are your three, right? There's plenty more, and you could get way more out of this from Scott's anatomy class, but I would, balance the two. Use this for digesting that information into your drawing, and then go to him for the most important, like, exacting information. So now that this is done, let's put on top cartilage, and then we'll be ready following this to put it all together with some drawing. So this is going to represent our cartilage, or the soft tissue, or the underside of the hand, and what I'm looking to design there is just the palm. So if you press your palm, you'll feel the padding here, all along the bottom of the knuckle, outsides, base of the palm, inside, and then nothing around that inner circle area, and that's so that there can be some movement or flex. So that will go just like this. So I'm just going to put on top. So when I'm making drawings of the hand, I always look to contrast the soft versus the hard. And this is a great way to show gesture, as in hand grabbing something, is to show this padded area compressing, and then the top is rigid and kind of box-like. So one reason that's worth it to go through this is, one thing you learn about just looking at the bottom of the hand is that it's technically longer than the top. So this area, the orange, that would continue past the top here. So that's why we get these little kind of look like short and fat Star Trek logos. So Star Trek logo is something like this, right? So that's in between each. Or if you study drapery, it kind of looks like a diaper fold. Or there used to be a blog about landscape painting and entertainment design, and there's each one featured a guy with a stick. It was like Adventures of Stickman or something, because it was just like the guy for scale, and he was always seen from behind. So that would be here, and then these are also areas I would stretch or pinch depending on what the fingers are doing. So that's also an asymmetry, right? Is that these are longer, or at least the bottom of the hand is longer than the top. So we have a bit of an offset in terms of length between those. Now that's not all. So we would have this, but then we also have area of padding specific to each digit. So proximal, middle, distal. So 1, 2, 3. And then for the thumb, proximal, distal. So just on the underside. So just like that. And so what that will give us is the idea of the bending, right? So this is where we're going to see the fingers bending, where that crease is. These are also what's going to show, pinch and stretch of the finger most effectively. And then we would also see these filling out, more of the volume of the finger. Because I think of the top of the finger is slightly more narrow, kind of like that gold bar idea. So you could think of the finger kind of like this, where it's thinner at the top, sharper, and then wider and softer at the bottom. So if I'm looking at the hand from the top down, I have a tendency to see more of that as the outline or the contour. And so that would look like this. I'm not drawing over the bone, because that's what I would be remembering to try to keep sharp. So we could say it's something like this. And so the next thing that would be good to show as a final idea before we move into our process is bending fingers. Right, so we have all this padding. We've talked about what's interesting about it, how it works, what's under it in terms of muscle. So each finger can bend at a 90, or at least that's how I'll think about it in terms of drawing this way. So let's show a finger from the side here. This is the first, so that would be this, and then we'll draw the second and the last. And each one of your fingers bends at a 90. Right, so this would be the last digit, this is the second, and the first. So when I'm pinching or thinking of these areas of padding, whenever they bend or whenever your finger bends, they all turn into C curves, and then they create, or I create, the feel of a pinch between them with these loops. So I usually do a line per side and then a loop as a transition. So loop, line, line, and then back, and then this could be a loop against the palm. So this is the squash of each area of cartilage. And then the extended finger here, I didn't intentionally mean to flip you off by finishing that, would be the stretched. Right? So if you extend your fingers, that padding will be stretched, and then if you close them or flex them, the padding then pinches and changes the look or the dynamic of the hand. Last thing would be that thenar eminence I put over here. I would probably see some on this side, so I just fill in a little bit. I'm just going to put that there so the thumb feels a bit more rounded. Last but not least, the idea of the nail. The idea of the nail to me will always be something that just reinforces perspective. So when I do put the nail, I very rarely am thinking about kind of matching the specific, at least to start, but instead how can I take the basic idea of let's see, the finger. In this case, here's a nail, and let's include the padding with this too. So it looks like this. And it's a good marker for which way in perspective the finger is coming at you. So if it's coming up toward me, I would flip it like that to show that it's changing to this perspective. Now the benefit of this, just to tie it together, is when I'm using the finger as an element that's interacting with something, an environment or a weapon, that all of that padding reacts. So we can do like a squash and stretch. Here's a finger, like in an exaggerated way, let's say pushing a button or something. And you could say my imagination doesn't really extend to anything past creatively using boxes to describe a figure. So now this has become something like that, but it helps to key the viewer into how the hand might be reacting to something. Okay, so this is the amount of information I take into consideration when making my hand drawings. Pretty static views here. So the next goal is going to be to take this information and then use it to show perspectives, and hopefully at some point get more comfortable inventing hands as well.